Stephen couldn't believe his eyes. He stood frozen at the bedroom door, watching his wife, Sandra, in their bed with Richard, their wealthy neighbor. The betrayal cut deep. He quietly left the house, his mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and revenge. Stephen walked down the familiar streets of their suburban neighborhood, passing the local bakery where he and Sandra often bought fresh bread on Sunday mornings. The smell of freshly baked goods usually brought him comfort, but today, it only served as a painful reminder of his shattered marriage. He continued walking, trying to clear his mind, but the image of Sandra and Richard together kept replaying in his head. He found himself at the local park where he often took their children, Lily, Brian, and Timmy, to play. The laughter of children and the sight of families enjoying their day felt surreal. Stephen sat on a bench, watching as the world continued to turn while his life seemed to have stopped. He needed to think, to plan his next steps without letting the emotions cloud his judgment. After a while, Stephen decided to go to his brother David's house. David lived a few blocks away and had always been his confidant. When he arrived, David immediately noticed something was wrong. "What's going on, Stephen?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Stephen hesitated for a moment before spilling everything. David listened, his expression growing darker with each passing minute. "You need to take action, Stephen. This isn't something you can just ignore," David said firmly. They discussed possible options, and Stephen realized that he needed to protect his children first and foremost. He couldn't let Sandra's betrayal ruin their lives. Stephen spent the night at David's house, unable to face Sandra again. Early the next morning, he returned home to gather his things and check on the kids. Sandra was still in bed, oblivious to his presence. He quietly packed a bag and left a note explaining that he needed time to think. He took the kids to their grandparents' house, ensuring they would be safe and away from the turmoil. Once the children were settled, Stephen headed to a nearby coffee shop to make some phone calls. He contacted a lawyer to discuss filing for divorce and getting full custody of the kids. As he waited for his appointment, he sipped his coffee, trying to focus on the practical steps he needed to take. Throughout the day, Stephen ran errands, including visiting the bank to secure his finances. He needed to ensure that Sandra couldn't access their joint accounts. He also visited the local hardware store to buy new locks for the house. By the time he returned home, he felt more prepared to face the situation. When Stephen finally confronted Sandra, she was stunned. "How could you do this to our family?" he demanded, keeping his voice steady. Sandra tried to explain, but Stephen didn't want to hear it. He handed her the divorce papers and told her to leave the house. "I'll pick up the kids tomorrow," he said coldly, turning his back on her. That night, Stephen sat alone in the living room, thinking about the future. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but he was determined to protect his children and rebuild his life. The betrayal was just the beginning, and he had to stay strong for whatever came next. The next day, Stephen woke up early and drove to his lawyer's office downtown. The bustling city streets were a stark contrast to the turmoil in his life. He parked near a coffee shop he used to frequent and grabbed a quick breakfast before heading to his appointment. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and pastries reminded him of simpler times. Inside the law office, the receptionist greeted him warmly. Stephen's lawyer, Mr. Harris, a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes, listened intently as Stephen recounted the events of the previous day. "We need to move quickly on this," Mr. Harris advised, handing Stephen a stack of documents to sign. "Given the circumstances, we should also seek full custody of your children." After finalizing the paperwork, Stephen left the office feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. He stopped by the park to clear his head, watching children play on the swings and slides. The sight of families enjoying their day only reinforced his determination to protect his own kids. As Stephen made his way home, he noticed neighbors whispering and casting curious glances his way. Word of Sandra's affair with Richard had spread quickly through their tight-knit community. At the local grocery store, Mrs. Parker, the cashier, offered a sympathetic smile. "If you need anything, just let us know," she said softly as she bagged his groceries. Returning home, Stephen busied himself with household chores, fixing a leaky faucet and mowing the lawn. The mundane tasks helped him focus. He picked up the kids from their grandparents' house in the afternoon, and they spent the evening at a nearby pizza place. Lily, Brian, and Timmy seemed blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. The following day, while Stephen was working from his home office, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Richard standing on the porch, looking unnervingly calm. "Stephen, we need to talk," Richard said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. They sat in the living room, the atmosphere tense. "I'll give you $1 million for each of your 3 kids if you agree to let me adopt them," Richard offered, his voice steady but with a strange glint in his eye. Stephen stared at him, trying to process the outrageous proposition. "What are you talking about, Richard? Why would you want to adopt my kids?" he demanded. Richard leaned forward, a thin smile on his lips. "It's a simple business transaction. Think it over, Stephen. You could secure their future and yours." With that, he stood up and left, leaving Stephen stunned and more suspicious than ever. After Richard left, Stephen couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He decided to keep his distance and think things through. He spent the rest of the day focused on his kids, taking them to the zoo and ending the day with ice cream cones at their favorite shop. That evening, as Stephen was preparing dinner, Timmy accidentally spilled his juice on the kitchen floor. As Stephen cleaned up the mess, Timmy's innocent voice broke the silence. "Daddy, I saw Mommy and Uncle Richard playing a game in your office. They had papers and were talking about making us rich." Stephen froze, realizing that whatever Richard's intentions were, they involved his children in a way he had to uncover. The next steps were crucial, and he knew he had to tread carefully to protect his family from whatever danger lurked behind Richard's strange offer. Stephen's gut told him something was off. Why would Richard, a man who had everything, want his kids? He decided to keep his distance and think things through. The next morning, Stephen went through his usual routine. He prepared breakfast for the children, helping Lily with her math homework while Brian and Timmy played with their toys. After dropping them off at school, he headed to his office, determined to unravel the mystery behind Richard's proposition. Stephen spent the morning reviewing old emails and documents, searching for any clues about Richard's intentions. At lunchtime, he took a break and visited the local diner. The waitress, Jane, knew him well. "The usual, Stephen?" she asked, placing a cup of black coffee in front of him. As he ate his sandwich, he overheard a group of regulars discussing the latest town gossip, which inevitably included Sandra and Richard. After lunch, Stephen stopped by the library. He spent hours researching Richard's background, uncovering articles about his various business ventures. Although Richard had a reputation for being a shrewd businessman, there were whispers of illegal dealings that made Stephen even more suspicious. He borrowed several books on business law and child custody, determined to understand his legal options. Later that afternoon, Stephen returned home and checked his office for anything out of place. He found nothing unusual at first, but Timmy's words from the previous night kept echoing in his mind. He decided to install a small hidden camera in the office to monitor any future activity. As evening approached, Stephen picked up the kids from school and took them to the park. They played on the swings and slides, their laughter a temporary distraction from the growing unease. While watching them, he spotted Richard across the street, talking to a group of men. The sight made his stomach churn. Back at home, Stephen prepared dinner. He set the table while the kids did their homework in the living room. As he cooked, Lily wandered into the kitchen and knocked over a glass of juice. "Daddy, I can't go to live with Uncle Richard. He is a monster." Lily's revelation confirmed Stephen's fears. Determined to find out more, Stephen put the kids to bed early. He returned to his office and started searching through every drawer and file cabinet. He meticulously examined each document, looking for anything that might explain Richard's bizarre offer. Stephen's search continued late into the night. He eventually discovered a hidden compartment in his desk. Inside, he found a folder containing several legal documents. They outlined a complex scheme involving the children, but the details were vague. It mentioned trusts, overseas accounts, and various business entities that Stephen had never heard of. The next day, Stephen visited his lawyer again, bringing the newly discovered documents. Mr. Harris scanned through the papers, his expression growing more serious with each page. "These are highly suspicious," he said. "It looks like Richard is planning something illegal, possibly using your children as pawns." Stephen decided to call the police. He reported his suspicions and handed over the documents. The officers assured him they would investigate the matter thoroughly. They suggested Stephen stay vigilant and avoid any further contact with Richard until they had more information. Determined to protect his family, Stephen continued his routine, keeping a close eye on the children and installing additional security measures around the house. He knew he had to remain cautious and gather more evidence to uncover the full extent of Richard's plan. As days passed, Stephen meticulously documented everything he observed, from strange phone calls to unusual visitors. He even took photographs of Richard's meetings and collected any information that might help the police. He realized that staying proactive was the only way to safeguard his children from whatever danger lurked in the shadows. Stephen's heart skipped a beat. He knew Richard had a history of shady business dealings, but this sounded different. Determined to uncover the truth, Stephen spent hours in his office, searching for any hidden documents that might reveal Richard's intentions. He began by checking his desk drawers and file cabinets. Among the usual paperwork, he discovered a false bottom in one of the drawers. Carefully prying it open, he found a folder stuffed with documents. Stephen took them out and spread them across his desk, meticulously going through each page. The documents outlined plans to exploit the children in some twisted scheme involving illegal activities and potentially dangerous situations. There were contracts, bank statements, and emails discussing various transactions and meetings. One particular email exchange between Sandra and Richard detailed how they intended to use the children to gain access to substantial financial assets. Stephen felt the urgency to act quickly. He made copies of all the documents, ensuring he had evidence to support his suspicions. The next day, he visited his lawyer again, presenting the newfound documents to Mr. Harris. "These confirm our worst fears," Mr. Harris said gravely. "Richard's involvement in illegal activities is undeniable. We need to take immediate action." Leaving the lawyer's office, Stephen decided to visit the police station. He handed over the documents to the authorities, explaining everything he had discovered. The officers assured him they would investigate thoroughly and keep a close watch on Richard. Back home, Stephen focused on maintaining a sense of normalcy for the children. He continued with their usual routine, taking them to school, helping with homework, and spending quality time together. One evening, he took them to the local ice cream parlor, where they enjoyed sundaes and laughed about their day at school. It was moments like these that reminded Stephen of what he was fighting to protect. Stephen installed additional security measures at home, including new locks, surveillance cameras, and an alarm system. He also reached out to close friends and family, asking them to keep an eye on the children and report any suspicious activity. One afternoon, Stephen received a call from the police. They informed him that they had placed Richard under surveillance and were gathering more evidence to build a solid case against him. Stephen felt a sense of relief, knowing that the authorities were taking the matter seriously. While waiting for updates, Stephen continued his investigation. He visited the local library to research more about the names and companies mentioned in the documents. His findings led him to believe that Richard was part of a larger network involved in various criminal activities. He shared this information with the police, hoping it would aid their investigation. As days turned into weeks, the tension grew. Stephen remained vigilant, documenting everything he observed. He noticed Richard meeting with unfamiliar individuals at odd hours and receiving suspicious packages. Stephen took photographs and noted down license plate numbers, passing this information to the police. During this time, Stephen also made sure to keep his children occupied with fun activities. They went on weekend trips to the countryside, visited museums, and spent afternoons at the beach. These outings provided a temporary escape from the looming threat, allowing the children to enjoy their childhood. One evening, while reviewing the surveillance footage, Stephen spotted Richard entering a warehouse late at night. He immediately informed the police, who planned a raid. The next day, Stephen anxiously awaited news from the authorities. When the call finally came, he learned that the raid had been successful. The police had arrested several individuals and seized incriminating evidence. Stephen felt a glimmer of hope. The investigation was far from over, but the arrest marked a significant step towards uncovering the full extent of Richard's criminal activities. Stephen knew that he had to stay vigilant and continue cooperating with the authorities to ensure his family's safety. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Stephen called the police. He provided them with the documents and details he had uncovered. The officers took the evidence seriously and promised to investigate further. The next day, 2 detectives visited Stephen's home. They examined the hidden documents, took statements from Stephen, and advised him to keep a low profile while they worked on the case. Stephen agreed, focusing on keeping his daily routine as normal as possible for the children. Stephen drove the kids to school, reminding them about their after-school activities. Lily had a ballet class, Brian was attending a soccer practice, and Timmy had a playdate with a friend. After dropping them off, Stephen visited the grocery store to stock up on essentials. He picked up bread, milk, fresh vegetables, and snacks the kids loved. Back home, Stephen checked the surveillance footage he had set up. He watched hours of video, noting any suspicious activity around the house. Later, he met with Mr. Harris again to discuss any new developments. The lawyer assured him that they were doing everything possible to keep the children safe and to bring Richard to justice. That evening, Stephen cooked spaghetti for dinner. The kids chatted about their day, oblivious to the danger that loomed over them. After dinner, Stephen helped them with their homework, read them bedtime stories, and tucked them into bed. Once the house was quiet, he resumed his own investigation, searching for more clues in the documents he had copied. The police continued their investigation, working undercover to gather more evidence against Richard. They monitored his movements, tapped his phone lines, and tracked his financial transactions. Meanwhile, Stephen kept collecting information, documenting every detail meticulously. One afternoon, Stephen received a call from Detective Roberts. "We need you to come down to the station," the detective said. Stephen drove to the police station, where he was briefed on the latest findings. The investigation had revealed that Richard was involved in a human trafficking ring, using his wealth to cover up his illicit activities. The proposal to adopt the children was a front for his sinister plans to exploit them. The detectives informed Stephen that they planned to arrest Richard soon, but needed more concrete evidence. Stephen agreed to cooperate fully, sharing all the information he had gathered. Over the next few days, Stephen stayed alert, documenting every suspicious interaction he observed between Richard and his associates. One evening, Stephen noticed a black van parked near his house. He took photographs and noted the license plate number before informing the police. The detectives traced the van to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. They conducted a raid, arresting several individuals and seizing incriminating evidence. The breakthrough came when the police found detailed plans in the warehouse, linking Richard directly to the human trafficking ring. The documents included transaction records, fake identities, and correspondence between Richard and other criminals. The evidence was damning, and the police moved swiftly to arrest Richard. The next morning, Stephen received a call from Detective Roberts. "We've arrested Richard," the detective said. "We have enough evidence to charge him with multiple counts of human trafficking and other serious crimes." Stephen felt a sense of relief, knowing that the immediate threat to his children was over. The news of Richard's arrest spread quickly through the community. People were shocked to learn about his criminal activities and his involvement in such a heinous scheme. The scandal rocked the town, leaving everyone reeling from the revelations. Stephen continued to cooperate with the authorities, providing any additional information they needed to build their case. He knew that the battle was not over, but he was determined to protect his children and ensure that justice was served. As the legal proceedings began, Stephen focused on rebuilding their lives, keeping the children safe, and trying to restore a sense of normalcy in their home. Richard's arrest sent shockwaves through the community. The news was on every local channel, and the story spread quickly. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones, trying to process the shocking revelation. The small town, usually known for its quiet life, was now the center of a scandal. Sandra, blindsided by Richard's true nature, was in disbelief. She had genuinely believed in his charm and wealth, never suspecting the dark side hidden beneath. The court proceedings were swift. Given the evidence against her and her involvement, however unknowing, in Richard's plans, she lost custody of the children. Stephen was awarded full custody, a small victory amid the chaos. Stephen focused on his children. He enrolled them in therapy to help them process everything that had happened. Each morning, he made them breakfast, ensuring they started their day with a sense of normalcy. They sat around the kitchen table, discussing their plans for the day. Timmy loved his pancakes with extra syrup, while Lily preferred toast with jam. Brian, the oldest, helped with the dishes, establishing a new routine in their changed lives. The children returned to their regular activities. Lily attended her ballet classes at the community center. Stephen watched her practice, marveling at her grace. Brian was back on the soccer field, his teammates welcoming him with high fives and friendly banter. Stephen took Timmy to the park, where they played on the swings and slides, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. In the evenings, Stephen made dinner, sometimes trying new recipes he found online. He introduced the kids to spaghetti carbonara, which quickly became a family favorite. After dinner, they would gather in the living room, watching movies or playing board games. These small activities helped them bond and heal. Stephen also maintained his vigilance. He checked the surveillance cameras regularly, making sure their home remained secure. He spoke with the police frequently, staying updated on the investigation. Richard's arrest had uncovered more about his criminal network, and the authorities were working tirelessly to dismantle it. The community, though initially shocked, rallied around Stephen and his children. Neighbors brought over meals, offered to help with school pickups, and provided moral support. Stephen appreciated their kindness and accepted their help, knowing he couldn't do it all alone. Sandra, now living with her parents, tried to regain some semblance of normalcy. She found a job at a local bookstore, keeping herself busy. Occasionally, she reached out to Stephen, asking about the children. Stephen kept their conversations brief, focusing on the practicalities and ensuring the kids' well-being. One day, Stephen took the children to visit his sister, Karen, who lived a few hours away. They spent the weekend at her farm, enjoying the fresh air and open space. The kids helped feed the animals, rode horses, and played with their cousins. It was a refreshing change, giving them a break from the intensity of their recent experiences. As the months passed, Stephen began to feel a sense of stability returning to their lives. He continued to work from home, balancing his job with his parental responsibilities. He was determined to provide a safe and nurturing environment for his children. The community held a small fundraiser to support the police's efforts in combating human trafficking. Stephen attended, grateful for the community's support. He spoke briefly, thanking everyone for their help and highlighting the importance of staying vigilant against such crimes. Life slowly moved forward. Stephen, though always watchful, allowed himself moments of peace. He gardened in the backyard, growing tomatoes, herbs, and flowers. The children thrived in school, making new friends and excelling in their activities. Despite the shadows of their past, they found light in their new routine. Stephen knew the road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but he was ready to face them head-on, ensuring his children remained safe and loved. Several months after Richard's arrest, life had begun to find a new rhythm for Stephen and his children. The local community had mostly returned to its usual quiet routine, but Stephen remained cautious, keeping an eye out for anything unusual. One afternoon, as he was sorting through the mail, a letter caught his attention. It was an envelope with no return address and a postmark from a city several hundred miles away. Stephen opened it carefully, pulling out a single sheet of paper. The letter was typewritten, with no signature. It detailed more of Richard's hidden crimes and suggested that some of his accomplices were still active. The letter hinted at a broader network involved in illegal activities and warned of potential dangers that could affect Stephen and his children. The final line read, "Stay vigilant. The network isn't finished." Stephen placed the letter on the kitchen counter and reviewed it several times, trying to piece together its implications. He knew that Richard's criminal activities had uncovered a larger network, but this letter made it clear that some threats might still be out there. The next day, Stephen started by visiting the local police station. He handed over the letter to Detective Roberts, who assured him that the information would be investigated further. Stephen was advised to maintain heightened security around his home and to report any suspicious activities immediately. Returning home, Stephen decided to take practical steps to ensure his family's safety. He contacted a security company to upgrade the home security system. They installed new cameras, motion sensors, and an alarm system, ensuring that every corner of the property was covered. Stephen also set up remote monitoring on his phone so he could keep an eye on things when he wasn't at home. Stephen enrolled in self-defense classes at a local gym. Each week, He practiced basic techniques and learned how to handle various self-defense scenarios. The classes were held in a well-lit, organized facility with mats and training equipment. Stephen dedicated time to practicing punches, kicks, and defensive maneuvers, feeling more prepared with each session. He also decided to hire a private investigator to look into any remaining threats. He found a reputable investigator, Mary Mills, who had experience dealing with cases involving organized crime. Mary started by reviewing the information from the letter and conducting her own background checks and surveillance. Stephen continued his daily routines, but with added precautions. He took different routes when driving the kids to school, sometimes varying the times to avoid predictable patterns. At home, he kept the doors locked and the windows secured, always aware of the importance of vigilance. One Saturday, Stephen took the kids to the local farmer's market. They strolled through the rows of stalls, picking out fresh produce and homemade goods. Lily chose apples and carrots, while Brian picked out some artisan cheese. Timmy was fascinated by a vendor selling colorful kites, and Stephen bought one for him. Back at home, Stephen continued to monitor the security system and stay in touch with Mary. He occasionally checked in with Detective Roberts for updates on the investigation. The private investigator reported no immediate threats, but she was diligent in her efforts to uncover any remaining connections to Richard's criminal network. Stephen also made sure the kids stayed involved in their extracurricular activities. Timmy attended his weekly playgroup, where he enjoyed arts and crafts. Lily practiced her ballet routines, and Brian participated in soccer games. Stephen attended each event, supporting his children and maintaining a sense of normalcy. As the weeks passed, Stephen kept a close watch on the situation, adapting to any new information and staying alert. His focus remained on ensuring his children's safety and preventing any potential threats from affecting their lives. With the recent developments, Stephen took every precaution to ensure his family's safety. The security system installation was completed by a team from Safeguard Solutions. The technicians spent the day installing high-definition cameras around the house, setting up motion detectors, and calibrating the new alarm system. Stephen made sure to review the system's functionality, testing each camera and sensor to confirm they were working properly. Stephen's self-defense training took place at the local gym, Combat Fitness Center. The classes were held in a large, well-equipped room with punching bags, mats, and various training tools. Stephen practiced basic and advanced techniques, including defensive moves and strategies for escaping holds. Each week, he attended a 2-hour class, focusing on improving his skills and learning new methods for self-defense. The private investigator, Mary Mills, continued her work diligently. Stephen provided her with the mysterious letter and any other relevant information he had gathered. Mary conducted background checks, analyzed financial records, and performed discreet surveillance. She also checked local and federal databases for any connections to Richard's network. Stephen received weekly updates from Mary, outlining her findings and the progress of the investigation. Stephen maintained a routine that involved regular checks of the security system. Every evening, he reviewed the footage from the day's recordings, ensuring that everything was in order. He also updated his contact list with emergency numbers and made sure his phone was always charged and within reach. In his spare time, Stephen made small improvements around the house. He planted a vegetable garden in the backyard, growing tomatoes, cucumbers, and bell peppers. The kids enjoyed helping him water the plants and harvest the produce. It became a family activity, adding a bit of normalcy and engagement to their lives. Stephen also took the children on outings to keep their lives balanced. They visited the local science museum on weekends, where they explored interactive exhibits and attended educational workshops. On other days, they went to the community pool, where Timmy splashed around in the shallow end, while Lily practiced her swimming strokes and Brian raced his friends across the lanes. Stephen made it a point to stay involved in his children's school activities. He attended parent-teacher conferences and helped with homework. On occasion, he volunteered for school events, such as helping at the book fair or chaperoning field trips. His presence was a constant reminder of his commitment to their well-being. The home security system proved its worth when a neighbor's cat set off the motion detectors one night. Stephen received an alert on his phone and reviewed the footage, finding the cat wandering near the front porch. The incident was a false alarm, but it reassured Stephen that the system was functioning properly. Stephen also reviewed the house's emergency plans with the kids. He explained how to use the fire alarms and where to go in case of an emergency. They practiced evacuating the house, ensuring everyone knew the quickest routes to safety. Despite the constant vigilance, Stephen found moments of routine comfort. He cooked dinner each night, trying new recipes and occasionally making their favorite dishes. The family gathered around the dinner table, enjoying meals together and discussing their day. Stephen found solace in these daily activities, knowing that he was providing a stable environment for his children. As time went on, Stephen kept a watchful eye on any new developments. He maintained communication with Mary and stayed informed about any potential threats. His focus remained on protecting his family, ensuring their safety while striving to keep their lives as normal as possible. Stephen was organizing Richard's former office, which he had decided to turn into a home office for himself. While moving books and documents around, he noticed a loose panel behind a bookshelf. Curiosity led him to pry it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were several files and a leather-bound journal. He carefully pulled out the journal, noticing its worn cover and gold-embossed initials. MT. Opening it, he began skimming through the entries. The journal detailed various criminal activities, plans, and contacts related to Richard's illegal operations. What caught Stephen's attention was a section towards the back of the journal, revealing the existence of Richard's twin brother, Michael Turner. The journal described Michael as having similar interests and skills, making him equally dangerous. There were references to Michael being involved in organized crime, and even hints that he might be planning something sinister. The last entry mentioned a rendezvous with unspecified contacts, suggesting that Michael was still at large and could be a threat. Stephen set the journal aside and decided to take action. He first contacted Mary Mills, the private investigator, to inform her of his discovery. They met at a nearby coffee shop where Stephen handed her the journal. Mary agreed to review the information and update her investigation. Stephen spent the rest of the day inspecting the house for any potential vulnerabilities. He checked the locks, ensured all windows were secure, and reviewed the security footage for any unusual activity. Everything seemed in order, but the discovery of Richard's twin kept him on high alert. That evening, Stephen picked up the kids from their after-school activities. Timmy was dropped off at a playdate, Lily attended ballet practice, and Brian had a soccer game. Stephen made sure to arrive at each location early, keeping an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. After picking them up, they went to a local pizzeria for dinner, where the kids enjoyed their favorite pizza and chatted about their day. Back home, Stephen reviewed the journal's entries again. He made notes of any names and locations mentioned, trying to piece together Michael's possible whereabouts. He noticed that the journal referred to a series of meetings at various warehouses around the city. The next morning, Stephen visited the local police station to discuss the new information with Detective Roberts. He handed over the journal and explained the details about Michael Turner. The detective assured Stephen that the information would be investigated promptly and that extra patrols would be added in the area for increased security. Stephen continued his routine of monitoring the security system and staying vigilant. He took the kids to a nearby park, where they played on the swings and climbed on the jungle gym. The family enjoyed a picnic lunch, with sandwiches and fruit, and played a few games of tag. In the afternoon, Stephen decided to visit a hardware store to buy additional locks and a safe for storing important documents. He also picked up a set of emergency flashlights and batteries. At home, he installed the new locks on doors and windows, ensuring everything was secure. Later in the evening, Mary called Stephen with an update. She had identified a possible location where Michael Turner might be hiding based on the information from the journal. Mary and the police planned to conduct surveillance and potentially move in to capture Michael. Stephen, meanwhile, continued with his daily activities, including checking in with the kids about their homework and preparing dinner. The sense of normalcy helped him stay grounded despite the ongoing threats. He ensured that his home remained a safe haven for his children, maintaining routine while staying prepared for any new developments. As the days went by, Stephen kept a close watch on any updates from the investigation and stayed proactive in securing his home. The situation remained tense, but he was determined to protect his family from any emerging threats. Stephen knew that the time had come to act decisively. Armed with the latest intelligence from Mary and the police, he focused on preparing for the confrontation with Michael Turner. The police had identified a warehouse on the outskirts of town as a potential hideout for Michael, and Stephen decided to set up a trap to lure him out. On a crisp Saturday morning, Stephen started by arranging a meeting at a nearby diner. He contacted Michael's known associates, using an old burner phone to arrange a supposed business deal. The diner, known for its old-fashioned charm and red checkered tablecloths, became the focal point of the plan. Stephen, under the guise of negotiating, arrived early to scout the area and ensure everything was in place. While Stephen was at the diner, the police set up surveillance around the warehouse. They positioned themselves strategically behind crates and in unmarked vehicles. Detective Roberts and Mary Mills coordinated their efforts, preparing to move in once the trap was triggered. Stephen returned home after his meeting, taking the kids to their soccer practice at the local field. He watched from the sidelines as they played, keeping a watchful eye on his surroundings. He made sure to take note of any unusual activity, including the presence of unfamiliar faces. After practice, he treated the kids to ice cream at a nearby parlor before heading home for dinner. Back at the house, Stephen set up a few more security measures. He installed a new camera in the front yard and checked the battery levels on the existing ones. He also reviewed the footage from the past week, searching for any anomalies. His routine included a quick inspection of the backyard and locking up all entry points before settling in for the evening. At around 8 p.m., Stephen received a call from Mary. The associates had shown up at the warehouse, and Michael Turner was expected soon. Stephen was instructed to stay put and monitor the security feeds from his home, as the police were moving in to arrest Michael. The evening proceeded normally for Stephen and his children. They watched a family movie in the living room, with popcorn and soda, while Stephen kept his phone on vibrate, awaiting updates. After the movie, he tucked the kids into bed, ensuring they had their favorite stuffed animals and nightlights on. An hour later, Stephen's phone buzzed with a text message from Mary. The operation was a success. Michael had been apprehended without incident. The police had found evidence linking him to further criminal activities, including connections to the human trafficking ring. Stephen was relieved but stayed focused on the security of his family. The next day, local news reported the capture of Michael Turner and the dismantling of his criminal network. The community began to return to normal as the police continued their investigations. Local businesses and neighbors expressed relief and support, gradually restoring a sense of safety to the area. Stephen continued with his routine, including taking the kids to school and managing household chores. He made sure to engage in normal family activities, such as weekend outings to the park and occasional dinners out. The security system remained active, but Stephen's focus shifted to rebuilding the routine and maintaining a stable environment for his children. As life returned to a semblance of normalcy, Stephen kept a low profile, ensuring that any remnants of the past danger were thoroughly addressed. The community's support was evident in the way they rallied around him, offering assistance and appreciation for his role in resolving the crisis. Stephen's final step was to review the lessons learned from the ordeal. He made a list of safety protocols and emergency contacts, ensuring that his family remained protected and aware. The chapter closed with a sense of resolution, as Stephen continued to navigate his daily life, forever changed but determined to move forward.